happening. Awesome. So I think we can stop share, Alex. I'm going to welcome everyone to our very first Power 45. This is where we are interviewing women who have built successful businesses to share them with the $1 Million Women community. And we also are going to have themes to these talks. So today's theme is looking at ageism. How does it come into play in the entrepreneurial world? What can we do about it? Elizabeth Harrison is a friend, a very successful entrepreneur who's running a PR firm, H&S, that has been serving clients for over 25 years in F&B, in automotive, in retail, in tech. She has built an incredibly successful company, and I'm really excited to learn from her, not only some of the tips she has for all of us about how you can grow your business, but also to tackle this topic that is relevant to every single person here. As we were saying before, when we were kind of all chatting before we got started, we're lucky we don't have to ever retire, right, as entrepreneurs, but we do have to keep being able to attract clients. We have to get over our own mindset issues around aging. And I think all of us have a role to play in making some big changes in how we think about women entrepreneurs and aging and ageism. So with that, I'm going to welcome Elizabeth and bring you on here next to me. Here we go. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet all of you. I was listening to some of you chat. You all sound amazing, dynamic.
They are amazing, and we're so excited to have you here. There was a lot of excitement about this topic, which, as you and I said, Elizabeth, when we were chatting earlier, is something we all think about privately, but few people are talking about it publicly. So I'm thrilled that you have decided, hey, I'm gonna take this on along with everything else you've taken on, like running a 25-person team during a pandemic, which we want to hear about too. But so thank you.
No, thank you. And I love what you're doing. And I'm a mentor to some of the women in your community. And every time I talk to them and I hear about, what they're trying to do and how they're growing and what the struggles are, I'm very much reminded of what it was like to start. So it's great. And I think it's such an important thing to have a forum where people can share stories and share what's worked, what hasn't worked. So yeah, I really am very thankful that you invited me on. And by the way, speaking about age is kind of a new topic. So you guys, I've only just started this journey. So I'll be very curious to get feedback on whether you think, what I have to say is useful or what else you would like to hear about as I move forward with kind of thinking about a book or a TED Talk. So thank you guys.
Good. You're in the right place. This is not a shy crowd. So I'm going to encourage everyone to, as Elizabeth talks about things, put questions in the chat. And at the end, I'll pick out questions and have Elizabeth answer them or anything you want to know more about. Fantastic. Yes. And thank you for mentoring women in our community. We always hear that the mentor calls makes a huge difference for women growing their businesses. So we are so grateful. And now let us just dive right in. Why don't we just start with, how did you come to start your own PR firm at really a pretty early age? You've been doing this for 25 years. So, what happened that you were like, I'm going to go out on my own?
So I started the company in 1997. And I was in my sort of mid 20s. And PR in those days, so we've developed, but when we first started, we were kind of like a party planner, events. We were very tied to celebrities and what we called socialites and tastemakers in those days. And it was an interesting moment. And I always tell entrepreneurs that sort of choosing your moment, if you can, is important. So at that time, there were either very large PR companies like Ketchum and Porter Novelli and Edelman, or there were smaller agencies that were run by kind of like older socialites, right? For lack of a better way to describe them, where it wasn't so much a business as more a way to sort of leverage their contacts, right? And be able to do something useful. So when we started the business, we had some really good connections to some corporate clients. I actually grew up in New York City, went to Sarah Lawrence, and worked in magazines. So I had already started kind of building my brand and my contact list when I worked at Elle and Fame and Taxi and Connoisseur. So I came to PR already with a little bit of a Rolodex, right? Everybody on this call looks old enough to know what a Rolodex is. So, and that was really kind of what led, PR was an easy entry, right? Because you didn't need to have a lot of capital or cash. There was nothing you didn't need a warehouse. You just sort of came with your connections and your Rolodex and you started. And in those days, there wasn't a whole lot of training. There were no degrees, right? So I never got a degree in journalism or public relations. Actually, I don't think such a thing existed then. It's kind of interesting how it's evolved. And I found a partner, and she and I were very, very different. We had very different skill sets. We were complementary, but I would say polarizingly different. But in our instance, it actually worked, because everything she wanted to do, I didn't want to do, and vice versa. And we started with Mercedes and Motorola and a lot of big companies, even though we were a small company. And we ended up on the cover of New York Magazine. We were heralded as the Power Girls of New York. Some people might remember that. It was a big deal. And Lizzie
And back then you could call women girls without anybody giving you a hard time about it.
Nobody gave us a hard time. And we were girls, we were young. But anyway, long story short, we built the business, and in 2004, we had built it to 75 people. We were probably under 3 million in sales, frankly, but we had such a big reputation that people really felt we were a lot bigger. We created a lot of buzz about ourselves. We had written some books. We did a TV show, a pilot. We had a line of party products on HSN when Mindy Grossman first started there. So again, being super connected, we were able to do a lot of different things. We were, and now I say it because I've built now a completely different type of agency, but we were a very privileged agency, right? We were a lot of, white Jewish girls who all went to the same school and all had a lot of the same connections. So we built our brand. We sold 80% of it to Omnicom. And that was—
How much later was that? What's the timeline on that?
That was in 2004. So we started in 1996. So relatively short amount of time. And then we had a 5-year earnout. And, you asked the question, like, what do I wish I'd done different, just to kind of lead into some of the questions that you asked as I'm telling the story. Entrepreneurs always want to know how you made your first million. And I was telling Julia, I was trying to remember, frankly, it was probably within the first 1 to 3 years. We sold to Omnicom when we were still less than 2 million, which was really unusual, right? But because we had built such a reputation, and also because we leaned into luxury and fashion, and as a holding company, they really didn't have that entree. And one of the misconceptions people have is that luxury pays a lot. It doesn't. People in luxury brands pay the least possible, and basically you're supposed to say thank you for letting them work with you. So there's always been a perception that working with big luxury brands, is lucrative.
I would have thought that, yeah.
Yeah, I think most people think it. So what I would say is that we had a couple of big clients that helped us ramp up. We made a lot of mistakes in that we hired way too many people. We had no idea what profitability really meant. We didn't understand about utilization. We didn't understand about asking people how much time they were spending on something. So we were the poster child for overservice, right? So those of you in the service—
Undercharging, over-delivering.
Undercharging, over-delivering, spending way too much time, not right-sizing accounts. We had no idea. We didn't go to business school. We had none of that. So I say that, like, being part of Omnicom was like being able to go back to school, because all of a sudden, I didn't join EO. I didn't join some of the things that other people do, because I had this community of business owners and CEOs and CMOs who were so smart and had grown such bigger businesses. So, and at that time, a lot of them were a lot older than I was, right? So I was learning from people who had a lot more experience, which, when I talk about aging later, I'm going to talk about how to lean into your experience, because that's something that when you're younger, you don't even realize how little you really know.
Yeah, I'm excited to come back to that. Was there any mentor you had, or anyone who helped you sort of figure out the business?
I don't know if I would say— I'm not a huge mentor person. Like, a lot of people really do find 1 or 2 mentors that really help them through. I would say I had a lot of mentors who helped in different ways. So the people who I sold the company to, who were at the corporate head of Omnicom, I stayed very close to them, and I used them. I would lean into asking them for help. And I do think this is something women do a lot better than men. I think that we have a lot less ego in the game when it comes to kind of asking for advice or asking for help. So I definitely—
That can be a superpower. That can be a secret weapon sometimes.
It is a superpower. And I think that, well, for me anyway, it was fascinating, because if you go and you ask for help and you ask for advice, people love to give you advice and they love to talk. So if you just listen, you actually can learn quite a bit. So my mentors were people who were running bigger companies. And then there is a woman, her name is Barry Rafferty. She now runs global communications for Wells Fargo. She was running, so just to go backwards for 1 second, when we sold to Omnicom, we were part of a group of small companies that they were buying at a time when the economy was in a really good place, right? So 2002, 4, 5, business was booming. So they went and they bought like 20 or 30 companies that were all fairly small, which is not traditional. Holding companies usually won't buy a company unless they're 8 million or up. So we were lucky in that we were given this opportunity to be part of this group. The bad news was there was no mentorship. There was no understanding of how to actually work with a small company. So when you work within this is another thing that I think is interesting about the aging thing. And I heard somebody say it, I think Julie, you said a friend of yours is working for a law firm where at 65, they kind of exit you. So in corporate America, as you guys all know, even in the communications, marketing, advertising world, there's still a real push to kind of like get you out because you're generally making too much money and you're not necessarily considered relevant enough. And they feel like they can find somebody younger than you who can do the same job. So being an entrepreneur and having your own money definitely protects you, I think, to a large degree. So we were part of this group. It was called the Radiate Group. And then in 2010, when we were finishing our earnout, and for those of you who don't know, the way it generally works is when you sell your company, you get a certain amount of money up front, and then you earn out the rest. And it's usually, you have to hit a multiple of whatever they bought the company for. So at the end of the earnout, the world was falling apart. It was 2009. If you guys remember, 2008, 2009, 2010 was really bad. And they asked us to partner with a bigger agency, and we ended up partnering with Ketchum. And Ketchum was where I met, I guess, my mentor, which is Barry Rafferty, who had gone from running Atlanta to running New York to running global. So she was the first woman to be anointed the head of a global communications consultancy. So that was a big deal. And Barry was very instrumental for me and for our agency in breaking down P&Ls around the world and saying to her teams, hire the agency or the people that are going to do the best job. And so that really opened a lot of doors for us because what we did was very different from what Ketchum and some of the other agencies were doing. So I would say Barry was and continues to be somebody who I really admire. And I think she admires me too. She's actually a little younger than I am. So it's kind of interesting.
Oh, that is interesting.
We have a great dynamic.
One of the secrets, right, of mentorship is that you often learn as much from your mentees as they learn from you because they've got the experience, but you're the one on the cutting edge of the industry, you know, trying new things. So I think definitely a two-way. So here's a question is there something that you figured out along the way that you think if you had known it earlier, it would have made a really big difference in how you scaled your business?
Well, I think the overservice piece that I already talked about, because what would happen was we would take on a tremendous amount of work in business. And then instead of right-sizing it, we would just hire. So, you know, we were at like 70 people at less than 3 million in revenue. I mean, we were living a great life because we were taking the money out. We were kind of living on it, and we had very glamorous clients. You know, we launched Jimmy Choo, we launched Juicy Couture, we opened up, you know, Hugo Boss. They were a client for 3 years. You know, I was in Hong Kong with Lane Crawford. So we had all these, like, you know, Mercedes-Benz, we brought them to Fashion Week. We actually helped broker that deal. We were doing events in the Hamptons. So we were very high profile and doing a lot of amazing things. But
the margins weren't there, it sounds like.
The margins were terrible. And actually, you know, when Omnicom bought us, that was one of the first things they said to us is, you know, after the earnout, they said, you know, you have to figure out how you're going to actually make money, because it's great that you're so glamorous and you have all these amazing clients. But, you know, and also, to be honest, culture, I would say the one thing I wish I had understood more was how important culture is to business. I had no idea. I mean, we were really part of that generation where we treated people like shit, frankly. I mean, we
just worked people really hard and expected them to jump through hoops. And that's how I picture the PR world.
It was kind of like that. It was churn and burn. I mean, you got to work on amazing things. You got to meet celebrities. You get to be at glamorous events, but there was no work-life balance, so to speak. And also, you know, it was just a very kind of elitist world. So I think that one of the things I wish is I'd understood culture, because at one point our turnover was 50%, you know, it was really high, and we never had
that has a cost to it too, right? It does have a cost to it.
yeah, it had a tremendous cost, but I didn't know that. I mean, now believe me, I know that. You know, when you lose a person, it takes and particularly in this job market, hang on to your people. That's all I'll tell you.
Yeah, well, you're
Yeah.
also giving me an idea that culture would be a great conversation for another Power 45, but there's so much more we want to get into with you. So thank you for sharing your journey. I did want to, before we move into the ageism conversation, what happened with your firm during COVID? Did anything change for you?
Yeah, so I actually just bought my company back from Omnicom. So after many, many years of being part of a public company, um, it was an interesting journey because we had built up our experiential. So our core competencies are not only public relations communications, but also thought leadership and marketing partnerships, what we call brand engagement, right? So creating great content, influencer and talent, and then experiential, which falls under Studio HS. So we do mobile tours, we go into conferences, we build out experiences. One of our biggest clients is Bacardi. We go to music festivals, we show up, we do big Halloween events for them. Booking.com is another big client, Amazon. So we have a lot of big brand names and we do a lot of really interesting activations for them. So just prior to COVID hitting, I had gone into Omnicom and really touted the fact that I felt that experiential was going to be the next huge driver for H&S. We were Harrison and Schriftman. We have since become H&S. So I went in, I met with all the executives. Meanwhile, it was only 18% of our business, but the opportunity to really grow it, particularly if I could convince Omnicom to channel all that activation business from Porter Valley, Ketchum, and Fleischmann, which are the 3 of the 7 biggest PR companies in the world, which are part of Omnicom, who were all going off and doing various different things when it came to experiential. So I had done this big song and dance. I'd showed them all these graphs. I'd showed them all this growth. And then, of course, what happens is COVID. So what's the first thing to go?
Experiential, out the window.
Experiential. And not that, we were also, you know, heavily invested in what, in their minds, even though it was, to me, what I would call mass affluent, we were still doing a lot of what they considered luxury, right? And we were in automotive. Volkswagen is still a client of ours. We were doing retail, so, and travel. So all the places where, you know, in the first 3 months of COVID, everything fell off a cliff. They were like, oh yeah, that's H&S. That's what they
So how did you get from everything just went dead to I'm buying back my firm?
Well, so we had, the ironic thing is we had the most amazing year of our company in 2019. We had signed American Express, Amazon, Volkswagen, Belvedere. Yeah, so we'd signed 4.
Now I'm even more grateful you've been mentoring for us. Thank you.
I mean, we had signed 4, you know, very, very lucrative clients. And the Amex win we'd engaged a bunch of Omnicom agencies. Sorry. So it wasn't just our agency, but it was multiple agencies that we bought.
And I'm going to ask you for the short version because I want to get to the conversation about ageism. So how did you buy back the business?
So they came to us and they basically they offered me a deal I couldn't refuse. And they said, listen, we think it's going to take you a while to recover. How would you feel about taking your clients, your company, everything, and just doing it on your own with a complementary business relationship with Omnicom? So we're still a preferred partner to Omnicom. We still work with them on with a lot of their clients. We're still in their sort of, you know, family, so to speak. But now I have, you know, full ownership and can really chart my destiny when you're going through a tough time, like with COVID, and also you know, Black Lives Matter. We're 70% diverse. Our senior leadership team is 70% diverse. So, you know, which was interesting because Omnicom is certainly not diverse. So we were like the poster children for showing how to actually show up multiracial and also different genders, different ages, everything. So
what a great bridge. Well, first of all, congratulations for being able to buy back the firm. Very excited for you. And now I really want to get into our topic du jour. So how did you decide, okay, I'm already running this fast growing business, which I just brought back. I'm also going to start speaking out about ageism. What happened there, Elizabeth?
You know, it wasn't any single thing, except I think it was getting older myself. You know, I started to like, I had never, you know, I've always like looked kind of young, frankly. So
yeah,
it didn't really, so I never really, and I started, and this is what I said to somebody the other day, I started as a CEO so young. Because somebody asked me, well, did you ever run into ageism? Did you ever feel like it really affected you? And I said, I was always the boss from like a very young age. So when you walk into the room and you own the company and you're the boss, it's a different perspective. But I also, went through menopause when I hit 50, and I had never really I didn't know anything about it, right? So I was lucky because I actually went through it fairly, easily. But I watched a lot of my friends really, really suffer. Some of them, had tremendous weight gain. Some of them had memory loss. People, I didn't understand, until I sort of went through it, why you'd be sitting in a corporate conference room and all of a sudden somebody would be breaking out into like a sweat, and I just had no idea. And what it said to me is that if I didn't know, and I'm somebody, and I have a young mom and we talk about everything, but for whatever reason, we never talked about that. Right. So to me, we're talking about race, we're talking about privilege, we're talking about everything else, but I don't think we're really addressing the elephant in the room, which is ageism, and particularly for women, because I think men, not that men coast through it, I think men are affected by it too, but I do think that women take it more personally, and I think we spend an awful lot of time and energy and money, frankly, battling to try to stay young. And what does that mean? And what does it mean in your business life? I mean, it means a whole different set of things in your personal life, but I'm really mostly interested and focused on how do you lean into getting older, and instead of seeing it as something that's going to prevent you from doing something, I think you should lean into it as a way to stand up, move forward, and actually be a leader, right? I think it gives you power.
Yes. And we've been redefining so many other things in our society over the last few months, and reclaiming language and rethinking what it means to be part of different groups. Why can't we rethink what it means to be 50, 60, 70 as well? And especially when all of the evidence shows that we're going to be living longer, people work later and later, people don't have that straight trajectory career of get a job, make a bunch of money, retire. It doesn't work like that very much anymore. So you're right on point here. Is there something you're seeing specifically in the entrepreneurial world, since we're all entrepreneurs? How do you feel this intersects the most with us?
Well, I think being an entrepreneur it probably affects you the least, right? Because you don't have a corporate structure, but you do have to show up a certain way for clients, right? And also for your staff. So attracting good talent is really difficult. I think, one of the things you can do is you can hire other people who look like you and who are older. You don't have to only think that the Holy Grail is in people that are 20 years younger. I think entrepreneurs, again, you don't have a lot of those barriers, but it's more how you feel about yourself. It's not so much what the work is going to put on you. It's more, how do you, I don't know about anybody else, but one of the things I'm working a lot on is energy. I do feel that as you get older, especially after a year like we've all had, how do you replenish? How do you find energy? And I think looking at a lot of my younger staff, because the majority of my staff used to be early 20s. Now, actually, I have a lot of different ages. And I think in a way, if you're in your 50s or late 40s, 50s, 60s, and your kids are behind you, I'm watching the young moms and they're struggling a whole lot more. The ones who had to homeschool their kids, the ones who are still having to do a lot of the physical pickup, taking their kids, like a lot of us are through those years, right? So I think it's a good moment for self-care too, right? Like really taking care of yourself, like, and whatever that means to you. Like for me, getting a massage once a month, making sure that I have my Pilates trainer, making sure that I have a coach, that's something new for me, like investing in a really great coach who's really helping me. Finding
some of it about owning your worth. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do think what's interesting about as you get older, I'm in my early 50s, is like no one comes down from the heavens and says, okay, now you can treat yourself differently, right? You just have to make that decision. So I'll give you an example from my life. Like speaking of energy, after I went through menopause, I was just more tired than I ever remember being in my life. I've always been so high energy. And I have now completely embraced the fact that I have to take a 20-minute nap every single day. And my team knows, they put it on my calendar. When Alex got her job, it like said in her little standard operating procedure, like, don't book up the whole afternoon because Julia needs to take a nap. And to me, that is part of, moving against ageism, right? It's saying, what, I rock at what I do. And if I need to take a 20-minute nap every day, so be it. But that's kind of owning your self-worth. Is that a bit what you're talking about?
Yeah. And I think, naps or a workout or a walk or, just setting whatever boundaries you need to in your life. I mean, I just got back from a 3.5 week trip to Europe, right? So it was amazing, but it was very exhausting in a lot of ways because A, we're not used to travel, but also because I felt like I had to still be available, right, to everybody. So I would, at 3 o'clock, I would turn on my email and I would work till midnight, and I was making, and next time I'm not going to do it that way, because I realized that I didn't come back. I'm not as good to them or to myself if I'm not giving myself a chance to rest, right? And I think we as entrepreneurs, as women, we're used to taking care of a lot of things. I'm lucky I'm married to somebody who is a real partner, so he takes care of a lot of the home stuff for me, so I don't have to worry about that. But I do need more time. And it's the same with exercising. Like, I believe in weight training, where you push your muscles past resistance. That's where the work happens and the fat burns. But you have to let your muscles rest the next day. You can't do that every day, because if you do that, you're going to hurt yourself, right? You're going to cause harm to your body. And so I think everybody has to find what that is. I've been fascinated that the majority, and I don't know why, of young people in my office all have health issues. They either have irritable bowel syndrome, they have migraines, they have all kinds of issues and things. So it's, this generation is going to have its own list, this Gen Z and millennials. But I think for us, we just go and we go and we go, and we never stop, and we never let ourselves take a minute or take a break. So I think part of embracing aging is understanding that sometimes you're going to just have to let something go. You're going to have to just find a way to replenish.
Take your nap, or say, I'm going to have to do the Pilates. But it all does seem like it's like a well-kept secret, right? That nobody talks about. Like you were saying, you and your mother didn't talk about menopause. Like right now, there's like 4 different companies that are making having your period cool. Right. But I can't think of one company that's making like aging or menopause or post-menopause cool. So there is, work we need to do also as entrepreneurs to say, hey, this is just another phase of life, and let's not have this be some big taboo thing. We are getting questions in the chat. Is there anything else you want to share before we take it over to questions? Like, what is the big change you would like to see as you're taking this on and thinking about, going more public with this topic and giving TED Talks and things like that? What's the change you'd like to see, Elizabeth?
I don't know. That's part of what I'm trying to find. So I'm curious what people think needs to happen. And I've commissioned some research and some data to kind of really dig into that. I think that the same way you said, people aren't referring, like there's still so much emphasis on talking about a woman being a top CEO. I don't know. I think that what has to happen is that it has to be okay to acknowledge that you don't have to be young to be relevant. I mean, we're a huge potential. I mean, it's always fascinating to me. I'm in the advertising, marketing, PR world, right? So I know the kind of expendable income that I have to spend now on travel, on clothes, on beauty, on automotive. And it just always continue. There's an old-fashioned philosophy that when you get to a certain age, you're not as flexible, right? You've decided what you're going to buy. You already have your habits, but I don't think that's the case anymore with people that are older. I think we're all a whole lot more savvy. We're all a lot more plugged into what's happening right now. We are on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, like we're following. We have kids who we have different relationships with, some of us, or even grandchildren for some people that are even older. And I think that I'd like to see companies embrace, and I'm going to talk about women because I'm a woman and I'm older, and I think it is more prevalent in women, but the same way that people used to embrace men at a certain age as having all that gravitas and all that experience, that same thing should be happening with women. Why not? Why shouldn't it?
Right. The Devil Wears Prada. But then again, if you look at the movies, right, like Devil Wears Prada or even the new Cruella, often if you see a successful woman in her 50s or 60s, she's also sort of a bitch, right? If I may say so, right? Like there is that notion like, okay, you can be really successful, but then you're Anna Wintour, as opposed to, yeah, you're just a successful, well-rounded person. And maybe that's taking us off in another direction, but we should acknowledge that many more women statistically are starting businesses in their 40s and 50s. And I think we're even going to see people starting their businesses into their 60s as we live longer. So that's going to require a major shift, right? In how we think about women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. Some of it is internal work, mindset work, right? And some of it is let's shift society. So I'm getting a question here from Carol Kaufman, who says, I thought ageism is a prejudice or discrimination against a particular age group. Is there some new definition? And if you have other comments or questions, please put them in the chat. Yay, Alyssa is sharing me in my nap in her calendar too. Thank you for saying that.
That might actually be that might be the clinical description of ageism. I'm looking at ageism as it is discrimination. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I don't have empirical data right now. I haven't myself personally, been prevented from doing anything because of my age, but I'm looking and trying to find examples and cases. I know that and that part of it is because I don't know how documented it is. I think it's sort of a new thing that people are talking about it, which is why I want to find examples, and I want to, sort of do more research into, is this really something, is this a trend? Where are we kind of going with this? I do think there's just always been this feeling that at a certain point, you're supposed to kind of like drift into chairmanship, right? Like that's the thing that they do, even with men. Like I saw it happen at Ketchum. All these people would reach about 65 or even 60, and all of a sudden they were like sidelined into these chairman roles. Why? Like I don't know if that's necessarily fair.
Right? Did they want that, or is that just what was done? And I think we're going to see a lot of that change. They say that the baby who is going to live until 150 has already been born.
Wow, that's crazy.
Right? Yeah. So that gives a new definition of being 50 or 60. You're like not even halfway there. Shannon writes, I think having women like Kamala Harris in rising positions of power will help change ageism. That's a really good point. Also, women taking ownership of their age, whether it is by choosing to keep lines in their face or keeping visibility as business owners.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's interesting with Kamala because she also gets a lot of flack. Like every time she tries to do something, or she's sort of like, and I'm not saying politically everything she does is maybe amazing, but she tried to sort of do something at the border and maybe she made a misstep, but people very quickly go into, I think, this like accusation that she's like, I don't know, she's too aggressive, right? Like I think she got a lot of that, particularly during the campaign. So I think, you said, Julia, like I get a lot of times I know that people think about me as very tough. Like I know that my reputation is, she's really tough. She's a little bit scary. And I think that does go with this sort of like, if you speak your mind and you're unafraid and you're not afraid to be confrontational, you are considered like, you're a little bit of, maybe not a bitch, but like, watch out, like you have to watch her, or
like a little scary or something. Yeah.
Scary, or, and so, I find that I'm trying to often temper that with things like, well, my big thing this year is about being gracious, right? Like, because I do think being gracious is super important right now. And I think treating people with grace and having more empathy. And that's the other thing I'd say. When I was younger, I don't think that I was as empathetic and more compassionate because I hadn't been through as much, right? Like I hadn't had children. I hadn't had friends with, children who died, or people I know who have gone through some really, tough things, which I think most of us as we get older, we experience. And I don't think being powerful means that you can't be empathetic and you can't bring what's amazing about being a woman to the job as well. Like, I don't think you need to fall into that stereotype of like, I don't care, I'm tough, I don't feel anything, so.
And if we could only redefine one thing, and we can redefine many things, of course, that would be a huge gift, I would think, to the next generation, because I think you and I certainly grew up with those models, right? Of if you were at the top, then you were also super tough, some of which was because there were so few women who even made it through, right? That you had to kind of fight your way there. But I'm hoping with communities like $1 Million Women and with role models like you, right, that we can start to say, wait a minute, no, you can be a complete person, right? You can be a mom or not a mom, warm and friendly or not warm and friendly, and a really kick-ass business person. Right?
Yeah, well, I will tell you an Anna Wintour story since you brought her up, like, because I've known her for years. So the thing that I find really interesting about Anna Wintour is the persona she projects and the person she is, because I've seen her very vulnerable, where she actually cries very easily. It's sort of funny, but she's actually very, I think on the inside, and I've seen it exhibited that she is soft, but I think what I love about Anna Wintour, but I think is misinterpreted, and I think this is sort of another attribute, is she's decisive. And she often says this, if you as a leader are not afraid to make a decision, if you make a decision, even if you're not 100% sure about it, if you put yourself out there and say, we're doing this, we're going this direction, and then you lead that way, she has this incredible power to make whatever that decision is work. And I think sometimes, that's again interpreted as her being cold, and she's also shy. So I think that actually people who are somewhat, I think depending on, again, this feeds into kind of what the stereotypes are of women, and particularly as we get older.
Well, and it reinforces the idea that we should be able to be complete people and not be judged just on the fact that, we're in a position of power, or however, whatever, gender lens is added on top of that. And of course, I'm sitting here sipping from my RGB Ruth Bader Ginsburg mug, thinking, well, there's a role model right there, right? How old was she when she passed away? In her 80s, right?
Oh,
and
well, look at
the Supreme Court.
Nancy Pelosi. I mean, we have a lot of Kamala. Like, I think, I look at Nancy Pelosi, who's in her late 70s, I think, right? And that woman just stands up there and gets just pummeled, right? But she just keeps on going, and I love that she does care about her hair. She colors her hair clearly. She takes care of herself, and that's important to her, and she does that. And by the way, I don't think that it means that if you want to get Botox, or if you feel like, I color my hair, I get Botox, like I'm not going to be one of these people who embraces wanting, I want to look a certain way, and I think that should be fine. The same way, if you don't want to do that, and that isn't what you want to do, and you want to have gray hair, or you don't care, awesome. You're more.
But I think if we're honest, we're not there yet. Right? If we're honest, it's still the norm that as you age as a woman, you're supposed to do everything humanly possible to stay looking, younger than you are. So I think that is part of what we could help change. And, I'm with you. I do all those things too, but it does bug me that I don't feel like it's optional, unless I want to make that sort of like, that's going to be my cause. And I don't have the energy for that. I've got too many other causes. But Elizabeth, it's been such a rich, amazing conversation. We're getting down to the end here. I would love to know from anyone watching, is there something that made you come to this that you've been thinking about? And that might help Elizabeth, if you could throw that into the chat. A time you've experienced ageism, something you thought about. I was sharing, I take this nap every day. I'm trying to embrace that, not feel like I need to hide that. I've never said that publicly. To me, that already feels like a little bit of a, hey, I'm in my 50s. I need a nap. If you do too, go for it. God bless.
I think it's great you're saying it. I think it's fun. And there's a lot of research that says power napping during the day is actually really good to do. So
you're absolutely right. Yes, I've had a few men say that they power nap too, but for me it was a post-menopause thing, so it's definitely related. I'm just going to give everyone a minute to put their little chats in. And Elizabeth, I hope you will continue to talk about this and work on a book or a TED Talk. And of course, if we can be a resource here in the $1 Million Women community, we want to be part of helping you form these thoughts however we can.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's really, I'm looking at what Shannon just said.
She said, I started noticing when I was at the meetings, people gazing at the new lines on my neck. Wow. But I embrace it as a sign of power and confidence. Good for you.
They probably weren't staring at you like that. I think that sometimes we sort of self-project on what our insecurities are, but I think it's really good. I agree with you. This summer when we were on this trip, I have a million brown spots, right? Just as you get older, you get all, your skin gets all this stuff that happens. And I just finally just said to myself, I'm just going to let it go. I was with a bunch of people, and I was with, and we were all of a certain age, and we all just agreed that we were just going to not get into
that over it.
Because it's just and the point of letting people know your age or not is a really interesting one, because I still have a hard time with that. I'm going to be 57, and I still, I kind of cringe. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to say, you don't want to say your age because you don't want to be defined by what that number is. So I think actually, Carol, that's a really interesting point that I want to look into more, because I think that why is that, right? And as you get into being 60 or 65, 50s is still considered, I think, fairly, not that old anymore. But why are we so, I don't know.
Uncomfortable to say it.
Uncomfortable to say it.
Yes, I had a photo shoot on Friday and my
No, you
makeup
are not.
was making me up on Friday. What?
She's 71. I would never have guessed that.
Carol's on fire and raising money for her new company, which we love.
Yeah.
But on Friday, I had a photo shoot and I actually made a point of telling her my age because I also feel like sometimes we should just model like, yeah, this is what 53 looks like, right? And then, oh my God, I thought you were younger, which by the way, they may not always say, right? You don't want to get too attached to that.
Right.
All right. I think we're going to wrap up just because I want to stick to our Power 45 commitment. I know everyone's really busy building their businesses, but maybe we could just unmute to say thank you to Elizabeth. We learned so much from you today.
Thank you.
Unmute.
And Alyssa, I just want to say, I think that's great that you enjoy having people that have more life experience than you. I think that it's really important to have all different types of people on your team. Like, you know, it can't, if everybody's the same, particularly, I don't know what you do, but in my business, because working with brands, you're a coach. It's like, if I only have all people who are the same, we're not really servicing our clients really well, are we? Like, we're just giving one perspective, one point of view. So,
and all the studies back that up, right? That more diverse teams perform better too.
Totally. I mean, our business has never been better, even with COVID, I have to say. If anybody knows anybody looking for a job, please send them to me. It's so hard to find.
Send Elizabeth your PR people, or maybe she could just train them.
Yeah, Margaret.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I've followed you for years, and so I was just thrilled to see and hear you today. And I just say, go for it.
Thanks
Thanks for being a great role model.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It means a lot. You know, you sort of, and you guys know when you're heading up businesses, there's nobody really to pat you on the back, or this is something my coach is working on with me. She's like, you need to ask people to affirm you. You know, you need to ask for what you need sometimes. So yeah.
We're happy to be part of that. We're so grateful for your mentorship and for you taking the time to get this conversation going. And let's do it again when you're a little further along in the journey. We want you to come back, and we'd love to hear what else you learn along the way.
Great. I would love that.
Thank you so much. Good to see everyone.
Everybody.
Thanks for coming to the first Power 45. We'll see you in the community. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
everyone.
Bye.